Hey there! Your book sucks and nobody wants to read it. Sorry, that's probably not what you wanted to hear at the start of a channel about self-publishing, but it is the truth, and I know it's the truth because I speak from experience. Exhibit A, my first ever book. I wrote this in 2008, I think, and I published it on Lulu, which was the first print-in-demand thing, so that shows how old I am. And then in 2011, proudly threw it up on Amazon, and I can genuinely say that in all the years that followed, I don't think I've ever sold a single copy. I've given away a few hundred copies on those KDP free promo days, but my dog is intent on trying to eat these geese. But I don't think I've ever sold a single copy. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Good Lord, this dog, behave. Right. I think a lot of people follow my exact route into writing and self-publishing, things like that. They start off in life and say, I want to be a writer, and I know, because I want to be a writer since I was 9 years old. And they have a book they want to write. And I know, because as a teenager I had hundreds of books that I wanted to write. So they sit down and they write the book. And then they finish the book. And then they look around and they think, what can I do with this book? And they send it off to publishers and get rejection slips, and I know because I've been there. Or else they decide to jump into self-publishing and they get themselves a cover and they throw it up on Amazon, and then what happens? Nobody buys it. Yeah, as I said, I don't think I've sold a single copy of this book. It doesn't mean your book's bad. In fact, I had this book to hand because I've been reading it to my kids last few nights. And it's actually pretty good. It's actually a lot of fun. It's written kind of in the style of the old Saint books, so it's sort of third-person perspective. And like almost everybody's first book, it's very, very autobiographical. It's basically my little jaunt around Paris for a few years. Ernest Hemingway wrote in A Movable Feast that Paris is a movable feast, and I remember reading that biography last year and thinking, I want to write a Paris book. And then I was like, Roland, you've already written a Paris book. You've got Adventure Ready. And reading it again to my kids, it's actually fun. It's so fun to look at all the little details I have in there about the time I spent in Paris and the people I spent that time with. Sorry, extricating the dog. But it's not a commercially viable book. It's a good book, but it's not a commercially viable book. It's a good book, but nobody necessarily wants to read it. I mean, broccoli is good food. People don't necessarily want to eat it. So I experienced the fact that I had to decide what type of writer I was going to be. And I didn't actually make that plunge until 2013. So a lot of people ask me, how long have you been self-publishing? And the answer is 9 years, but actually I only consider it 7. But when I did it in 2013 and started throwing up all my steamy little short stories, it was with the intention of publishing and making money. Whereas when I wrote Adventure Ready and threw it up there, it was because I wanted to write Adventure Ready, and I wanted to see it published, and I wanted to have a paperback, and I wanted to wave it around in front of all my friends, none of whom I think have ever read it. My wife has actually read this one. I think she got very upset because the character was a thinly veiled reference to a real person who I used to gallivant around Paris with. I don't think she's read one of my books since. That's an aside. Anyway, your book sucks, nobody wants to read it, and that's because books aren't art. And this is a very, very important point. Check the time. Books aren't art. Books are a craft. And the reason for that is writing wasn't invented just to sell paperbacks. Writing was invented by humans so they could communicate. And to communicate, you have to craft messages that can communicate the point you're trying to make clearly. So writing is a craft, and people who are good at writing are good at communicating. They're good at using words to communicate what it is they want to say, or to make people feel things, or to tell stories. And in that respect, a book is like a table. And if you want to make a table, you have to learn how. I mean, you might think you know the basics, bang 4 pieces of wood to a flat piece of wood and you got yourself a table. but it's not a very good table. It wobbles, it's got sharp edges. So once you become serious about being a writer, you start to learn how to sand those edges and do the joints properly and do all the fancy stuff, and you can create something artistic out of your table. But at the end of the day, it is still a table. People aren't going to buy a table unless it has a flat surface and one leg in the center or 4 legs around there, but it's a table. And a book is like that as well. People buy books because they want a story told to them, and normally they go after the same type of stories that they like reading. So for me, I grew up on science fiction paperbacks and my mother's romance novels, and I like James Bond books, so those are the books I gravitate towards. And other people are the same. And the thing is that once you start getting into the area of trying to write books that appeal to people, you have to start respecting the craftsmanship that goes into them. And romance novels, because romance is my chosen genre, those are very, very specific. The romance novel, you've got to have the hero and heroine meeting, having the attraction, but thinking they couldn't possibly be together, or having antagonism, and then they grow closer, and then there's a mix-up, so they break apart, and they closer still. And there's this thing called the story circle that Dan Harmon uses, or the monomyth, which I'll talk about in another video. But there is a formula to every single story. And in the different genres that you have, there are different formulas to stories, and those are like the blueprints of a table. Table has a flat surface and legs, and a story has more than just the beginning and the middle and the end. It's got the need and the action and the sacrifice, and you've got to have those things, and you've got to have those things communicated effectively to have a story that is sort of commercially viable. And then depending on your genre, you've got to adopt the style of it. So I write romance novels, and I write them, each chapter is an alternating viewpoint, one from the hero and one from the heroine, and that's a very established sort of style of writing, and I like it a lot. I think it's really, really versatile. But yeah, I use that because that's what people who buy romance books expect. And the challenge to you as a writer is, you can be commercially successful as a writer, you can support your family as a self-published author, but there is a price to pay. The price is you no longer get to write your books for yourself. You have to write them for other people, and you have to write them in a style in which other people want to read them. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice your story or your characters. It's like the essence of your story and your characters can remain absolutely pure. You can be absolutely loyal, and you don't need to compromise on those things. But what you do need to compromise on is the way in which you tell your story. You need to plot it out so it fits within the formula of a story. And you need to read other books in the same vein as the books of you're trying to market yours as, to see how they write. Do they write in present tense? Do they write in past tense? Do they write in first person perspective? Do they write in third person perspective? There are conventions, there are styles, and it's like when you buy furniture, there are different types of furniture. Chippendale, and I can't think of any other type of furniture. Queen Anne chests and stuff like that, and they all have their own distinctive styles and aspects to it, and that's how you identify them. And that's exactly the same with books. And you can drill down. You have a genre like romance, and then you can drill down into historical romance, or clean romance, or romantic suspense like I write. And then in romantic suspense, are you writing bodyguard books? Are you writing MC books? Are you writing espionage books? And each one has its own distinctive style, its own distinctive formula. And the only way you're ever going to become a successful author is if you study those formulas, and you study the craft of writing these successful books, and then you learn how to do it. And I think this is an important thing to put very early on in a video, because this is what will make or break your career as a writer. A lot of self-published authors I talk to, they're like, oh, it spans multiple genres, or, you know, it's not like other things in the market. I'm like, that's great, nobody's going to buy it. Nobody's going to buy it. You need to be able to tell your story in a compelling way, using words to communicate it. And you need to meet the expectations of your audience, who expect a certain way stories are written and expect certain beats in a storyline. And then the trick to becoming massively successful, and obviously this is purely theoretical because I'm not massively successful, is to put your own unique, distinctive spin on it. You know, because nobody ever got rich and famous by following in anyone else's footsteps. But the distinctive spin you can't have until you've done the groundwork. Writing is a craft. So first of all, you've got to learn how to put the table together. Then you've got to learn all the little artistic tweaks that appeal to your particular audience. And then, only then, when you are the best table craftsman that you can be, can you start putting your own distinctive flair on it. Because nobody wants your distinctive flair if you're not competent at the foundations. I'm going to talk more about this, but I just wanted to put it out there as a message that, yeah, the too long didn't read, except this is a video, so the too long didn't watch, is unless you're willing to learn how to write books that people want to read, you won't make it as a successful self-published author. But this is an area that I personally want to revisit for myself, and I will take you along for the journey, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. So I'll put another video up soon. Cheerio.